Hello, everybody. My name is Victor Jimenez. I'm your executive director for the 13th annual Fort Lauderdale edition of the Outshine Film Festival. And on behalf of the board, staff, and volunteers, welcome to this Q&A for No Straight Lines. The festival is presented by Gilead, Culture Builds Florida, and Broward County. And without further ado, let's bring in our guest. First, we're going to bring in director and producer Vivian Kleiman.
Hello.
And as well as producer Justin Hall.
Hi there.
And then also let's bring in subject Rupert Kennard.
Hi.
Welcome, everybody. So first thing I want to say is, me personally, I was very excited to actually have this film in the festival. I like comic books. I like graphic novels. I like graphic novels that focus on just people's lives and their experiences, which obviously this documentary kind of hit all those bells. My first question really is, where did the idea for the documentary come about? And then, let's start with that. Where did the idea for the documentary come out? And then also, Vivian and Justin, how did you two team up to start the whole process of making the documentary?
Well, the two questions kind of merge into one response. Justin and I have a mutual friend, Greg Sirota, who's an editor I had worked with. And Justin is the expert in the subject and had originally been inspired to take a book, an anthology that he edited, No Straight Lines, and converted to a documentary film. And at some point, they got started, and at some point I was invited to hop on the train and get involved. But I just want to say, for me personally, what got me involved in the project was when they encouraged me to attend the first conference of called Queers and Comics. And I walked into the conference hall and I was completely overtaken by the diversity of people, from the young person with chartreuse colored hair to the Southern gentleman with a button-down Ivy League collared shirt. And I heard their stories and I saw the artwork and I was smitten.
Yeah, it was wonderful when Vivian came on. She brought her filmic expertise and her own vision, and we really then started focusing on the pioneers of queer comics. And that was such an incredible delight to be able to meet, to come and be able to film with all these heroes of mine, like Rupert and Allison, Mary Wings, Jennifer Camper, Howard Cruz, be able to film with them and go to their homes. And Vivian and I were able to really get their stories and their thoughts about their own art and their own words, and that was just a tremendous, honor and delight.
How long was the process of actually making the documentary? Like, usually my experience, and my personal experience, but just from Q&As and talking to other filmmakers, the documentaries kind of just take a while. What was the actual filmmaking process? How long was the whole thing to put together?
Well, in the absence of full funding, those of us who are independent filmmakers, it's actually a misnomer. We are very much dependent filmmakers, and we spend most of our time writing proposals and getting rejected and persevering, freelancing, and then every so often actually be involved in filmmaking itself. So it was done over many years, but not continuous, obviously.
And then Rupert, obviously you're one of the subjects in the documentary, and they approached you, but explain in, I guess, more detail how you got involved with the project.
I actually knew Vivian through a mutual friend, Marlon Riggs, many years ago. And it wasn't until the San Francisco Queers and Comics Conference a number of years back where we ran into one another, and she informed me that she wanted me to be a part of the documentary. And I had no idea the extent of what it was she was really working on. But bit by bit, I became more and more excited. In 2018, the film crew came to Portland, and that's when I knew it was on. So I was very excited about that, and that was just really the beginning.
Yeah, it's always interesting because your sentiment is kind of interesting. Where I've heard people say, "Well, someone I had this great idea," but then until like they actually come back and film you, that you realize that, oh wait, this is actually going to be a reality. It's not just some idea. The what I found interesting in documentary was really like, I guess, what a tight knit community the queer comics creators were actually. I mean, personally, I didn't know all the history that's there, and I want to thank you for actually making the documentary, because that's one of the things about queer history is that it's not really documented, and it's more recent occurrence that it's happening, and it's important that we don't forget our own history and also the people that kind of help make it happen. Like, was that something, Vivian and Justin, that were you aware of it, or were you surprised also what a close knit community it actually is, and you too, Rupert, because you're part of that creative community.
So why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been part of this queer comics world for many years, and so I was quite aware of the the really wonderful depth and of talent and all the different generations that sort of went into making this scene, developing the scene. So yeah, it's a remarkable artistic scene and community. And it's been really wonderful. I mean, there have been some crossover successes. Alison Bechdel is the most obvious example. But to be able to shine a light on the scene in total was really a wonderful opportunity. So one of the things that Vivian suggested was to actually bring in some younger queer cartoonists as a sort of Greek chorus to talk about the generational legacy, right? How the pioneers of queer comics had broken open doors that other creators were then able to go through. And that was really wonderful to be able to sort of make those connections and draw those lines between different generations of cartoonists. And I would also just say that cartoonists, like comics, like queer history, cartoonists have long struggled in a medium that has been sort of underappreciated, right? Oftentimes looked down upon by academia and other institutions. And so it's nice to see comics history also being paid attention to, as well as queer history. They're both sort of hidden histories.
Let me, I'm kind of curious about this. Like, I know, like, full disclosure, I go to Comixology and I buy comics from them, and they actually updating, obviously the big Marvel and DC, they update like from archives and they load it up there. But they've also done a fairly decent job of just doing other interesting things that I just randomly discover. And I know they have their section of like I would say, like LGBT, queer comics in there. Can a lot of the comics that creators that are featured in the documentary, are they part of Comixology? Are they in the process of working to get in there to get the exposure that platform actually brings? I mean, I guess, is there an effort to like get everybody in there, or what that process is?
It's still spotty. It's definitely still spotty. A lot of the stuff that Vivian and I looked through to create this documentary, a lot of it's very, very underground, very much out of print. There's a lot of creators who have passed away. So, there's a lot of digging through archival material that has not been properly documented and properly archived. It's not available on platforms like Comixology, unfortunately, yet. But I would say that there's been a sort of lateral explosion of the material. So recently, in the last a decade, so younger creators are much more accessible now via platforms like Comixology, and queer comics are winning Eisner Awards and sort of out on the bookshelves in ways that they just weren't when Rupert and other folks were really toiling away and trying to break open those doors.
And then I think if I remember correctly, like on your website for the film, you guys are doing something to help like spread the word about the creators, like on the nostraightlines.thefilm.com.
Well, the hope is that the film will spur a lot of interest in the subject and be a resource for people. We're not quite there yet, but that's in the plans.
Okay.
We've also have a sort of partnership with the Queers in Comics Conference, I helped run that, and Vivian was gracious enough to also help like archive a lot of the video taping of the material developed during those conferences. So a lot of these panels and stuff are. So that's another an opportunity for people to be able to dig into this material.
The Rupert, with the work that you did, like, do you like actually like have everything you created in like the original drawings, or do you like are you your own archivist that you have all the stuff that you created?
It's a good question because it really took something like the film to kind of make me realize that I was experiencing an overview of my career. And it's only somewhat recently that I've actually tried to archive so much of my work from the past. My comic strip began back in 1977, and the comic strip featuring the Brown Bomber first was published in my college weekly newspaper back at that point. And so it's been really interesting for me to think about where a lot of the original cartoons went. Um, Even when I was attending Cornell, at one point, all of the cartoon strips at that point dealt with issues and people on campus. So when I graduated, I remember giving a number of the original comic strips away. But
Yeah.
I really started back in '77. So I've the strip has run in a number of publications, and I really didn't keep track of them. And I'm just in a space right now where I'm really trying to archive everything. And there's been some interest in like the local lesbian and gay historic society here in Portland, where they've pulled together so much material from the community in general, and the fact that the Cathartic Comics has kind of made a small splash nationally, kind of puts the spotlight on the city really wanting to make sure that the comic strips are a part of the archives here.
Yeah, most definitely, because like I have a love affair of just like comic strips in general. Like I remember elementary school when the school had the book fair. Like I would just buy the compilations of Beetle Bailey, Blondie, whatever was there, and that's really what in fact I read. I didn't I was whatever you were forced to read for school. I did, but what I read on my own was always those little comic strip books that I have just a fond memories of, and it'd be so nice to actually have those like little compilations. And I don't obviously I don't think they're gonna be sold like to third and fourth grade or in schools, or at least not anytime soon. But it'd be this great little history, like you mentioned, the Portland Archives, or we have here in Fort Lauderdale the Stonewall Archives, where it is this history, and it is a history of a time telling stories that were very relevant at that time. That is a easy way for people to just kind of understand what was going on and coming up. And honestly, that's why I love them so much. And I think, Vivian, I cut you off when I was talking. You were about to say something, and I totally, or maybe I missed.
Well, that's what we always do when we're having a conversation that's lively. But I'd like to add that one thing that's really been very important for me is using the comics medium to tell queer history to a new generation. We have had many very wonderful documentaries on queer history, but the notion of retelling it in a way that's not just about the content, but also about the making of the images, I hope will inspire a new generation. I wish I had had it when I was a kid.
And it's actually, to your point, it is a kind of a relevant way. Like just the graphic novels or whatever, it gets you into a place and a time from the creator's perspective and their history or whatever. And it's typically something easy to digest and feel and understand. I applaud you, and quite frankly, I hope all the efforts that are kind of going in to preserve the history and kind of get it out there actually comes through, because to what Justin said earlier, sometimes people, oh, it's a comic strip or whatever, but there's good stuff in there, and you'd be surprised, what sometimes you get away with in a comic strip that you can't get away with somewhere else, and the whole scenario. So for everybody, I guess actually from maybe it didn't make a documentary, maybe it did make a documentary. What was your favorite to all of you? What was the favorite story that a story that you learned from the documentary from one of the creators or something that you went, wow, that was, I never knew that, I never thought that. And we'll start with Vivian, and then we'll go to Justin, and Rupert.
Now, Victor, you said you're going to ask easy questions. Pick my babies, huh? I'm going to just grab one, which is, I just love when we walked along Coney Island with Jen Camper, and she points out the old signage and the old lettering. And I just felt like she was bringing me back many decades back, and looking at the environment around me, not just as old signs that are no longer, interesting, but as stuff that had people and ideas and creativity.
Howard Cruz, who the film is dedicated to, he died unfortunately before we were able to show him the film. But he's really the godfather of queer comics and was a monumental figure in American cartooning and in queer history, and really deserves. I think we all hope that this film will help cement his place in history, and to be able to. And I knew him and I worked with him before, but to go there and spend so much intimate time with him and hear his stories was really just a dream come true. Especially when he was sitting there chatting with Dennis Kitchen, who was his first publisher for the Gay Comics anthology series back in 1980, begun in 1980, and sort of hearing them, like they sent out this mimeographed letter to everybody that they knew and Dennis Kitchen's Rolodex to say, hey, there's this new queer comics anthology, who wants to be a part of it, and not knowing who was queer in this heavily closeted industry. And they got back some sort of homophobic responses, but they wound up with a community built around this anthology. To hear that was incredibly inspiring. That sort of courage back then to do that work.
And you, Rupert?
Yeah, for me, the production crew coming to Portland in 2018 seemed so long ago, and by the time the film was finished, I just had no idea what was going to be in the film, and how different people were going to be presented and how it was going to tie together. So really, there were many, many instances in the film where I was very, very impressed with what was chosen to be a part of the film. But one of the things that sticks out for me is that I knew part of my history is that when I first started my comic strip, it was as a result of reading a lot of superhero comic strips. And I relate in the film how I started drawing Superman and Batman and all these other superheroes. And even more importantly, I started creating my own superheroes. And for a while, I'm just creating all these heroes and I'm having a great time with them. And then because of my love of Muhammad Ali and my, learning more about, racism in this country, I actually became very upset with myself for drawing and creating white characters. But when I saw the film, the big revelation was that Allison kind of had a similar journey, in that she was, all the drawing she was doing in the beginning, she was drawing all these men, and at one point she's like, what the hell, there's enough men in comics, why am I drawing men also? And we both kind of realized that at different times, and that kind of informed where we were going to go from that point on.
No, that was actually a great insight that you realized, and she realized it also, and you saw that, and it just goes to show you get used to always seeing the same thing over, and then you end up just repeating the whole cycle, and not even realizing that you're doing it. Well, Rupert, Justin, Vivian, I want to say thank you so much for creating a film, Rupert, you being a part of it, and allowing us to show it in the film festival. I really enjoyed it, and thank you today for giving your time to be part of this Q&A. It is very much appreciated. And I just want to say thank you from here, us in the festival, to you.
And I also want to thank you, because without having the volunteers and the staff and the leadership and the board of directors of a film festival, the independent filmmakers would have a very hard time having our work seen by the audiences that we are creating the films for. So I thank you enormously.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Excellent. And then for our viewers, we're going to end with the trailer for No Straight Lines.
From the very first time I saw an image of the Brown Bomber and Diva of the World, I was just like, who is that? Who are these characters? I love them.
That's not the drawer. That's the drawer. That's not the drawer.
It really continues to blow my mind how short a time ago Howard Cruz put out that first anthology of gay comics. Or Mary Wings put out that first lesbian comic. Putting it out there with literally nothing else like that ever having existed.
I love that Jen Camper is an out Arab American hardcore feminist woman.
If you have a pencil and a piece of paper, you can make a comic.